I think where what my expertise, if anything, has taught me, is the value of meditation in ordinary life. And I thought we might this morning talk a little bit about how we understand meditation in ordinary life, and how we can think ahead from this retreat as the storm after the peace arrives. Biggest storm since 1987 in England, they say. Yeah,
Really?
It's a big storm. Hitting London tomorrow, or England tomorrow. Hopefully we'll avoid London and get Buckinghamshire and other places. So that we'll have to get out tomorrow. Anyway, not to make you too anxious about that. But so this morning after meditation, I got an email which was very irritating, and as we all do. And so I wrote my response to it, which was an irritated response, and perfectly logical, reasonable, but I realised totally useless in terms of bringing the incident or the minor storm into a teacup. It's the second time in 2 days we've talked about teacups. Yeah. Remember? Oh yeah. We're talking about killing people who So anyway, this little storm in a teacup, and and when I read it again, and I knew that this was not the time to send the email, and writing it.
Press the button.
I didn't. That's it. You see, that's exactly it. I wrote it, and it got it. I expressed my feelings, and I realised this. You have to let time settle, and probably this person will write and apologise. Quite often they do, and then anyway. So I think meditation. That's where I would say it's a minor way, but it's a significant way in which meditation helps you in life and in work and in relationships. And it may not, be as exciting as levitating or seeing visions of the cosmos, but it's a real sign of the profound change, transformation, and how it contributes to a world in which peace prevails, and where we can come to non-violent resolution of conflict. In the story of Cain and Abel, Cain becomes jealous of his brother's favour with God as he sees it. Doesn't seem to be any evidence for God preferring the sacrifice or the offerings of Abel, but anyway, Cain feels that God is favouring him, and he feels sad and angry. And God then speaks to Cain, and says, "Why are you sad and angry? Wait," he says. Don't press the send button yet. Wait. Sin, and I think it's the first time the word sin is used in the Bible. Sin is waiting at the door, ready to pounce. So it's like a monster that you will let out of a cage. And if you don't wait, breathe and say your mantra and stay in the moment, you will press the send button, or you will kill your brother. In many ways of killing your brother or sister with a word. As it Oscar Wilde said, each man kills the thing he loves. Some do it with a word, some with a look. The brave man does it with a sword. Does it with a sword, yes. So, anyway, so this is, and I think, you know, if you think of the failure of humanity to learn the lessons of its great teachers, that violence never resolves a conflict. It only feeds the fire for future generations. A report from Syria is coming in now of the devastation of the country, the millions of refugees. I say this has already set the country back decades, just in terms of its material prosperity, and decades it's going to take to rebuild this country. There was a scene, you probably saw it on the news, where the government army had been bombarding the city, I forget the name now, for weeks and weeks. What was it? For weeks. And finally they won and invaded the city, and there was no one there. There was no one there. There were about 50 people, old people, left in the ruins. So that's, you know, no better image of violence, and how long will it take to rebuild that? And not only that, but if you think of Northern Ireland, there are 3 commissioners for victims of violence, because the real healing of the wounds of those many years of violence, murders, assassination, catcalling, expelling from one street to another, burning out pubs, I mean, all of that leaves wounds so deep within the generational memories. So, we don't, you know, we haven't really got it, have we, as a human family? We still keep repeating the same mistakes. And so, the widespread teaching, the widespread instruction in this art of meditation offers us, I think, a very real possibility of at least reducing the intensity of violence. That's the first step. When the Dalai Lama came to Belfast and met with the political leaders, and he said, you know, I'm not an expert on Northern Ireland politics. He wasn't. But he said, you know, what I can share with you is what I've learned from my own experience, the invasion of my country by China, and how I dealt with my own feelings of anger, which I feel every day, and sadness and anger, and how he understood forgiveness, for example. And there was a woman in one group we met with in Derry, between the Royalists and the Republican, the Royalists and Republican camps. We walked into the room, and there were these 2 sides of the room, about maybe 30 or 40 on each side, and the temperature in the room was about like -20. And we walked in, and we just felt this shiver, this tightness, tension, coldness. And the Dalai Lama, to his credit, picked it up immediately. I mean, he has a warm personality, so he began to warm the room up, but he immediately didn't waste any time with introductions and formalities. He just went straight in, and he just said, you know, I want to tell you my story. And she did, about China, Tibet. And gradually people began to tell their stories on both sides, and the temperature was changing. And right at the end, I saw there was a woman in the front row who had been sitting with a very concentrated look, but not saying anything. And then just before we wrapped up, she said, can I just say something? She said, about 10 years ago, I was watching television with my husband in the front room. The doorbell rang. He got up to answer the door. Somebody shot him 3 times in the chest. And she said, for the last 10 years, I've been struggling with that. I've accepted what has happened. But she said, and after some time I felt, well, I'm a Christian. I don't remember which side she was on. I'm a Christian, And she said, I should try to forgive. And she said, then I thought, how can I forgive? They haven't asked for forgiveness, so how can I forgive them? And I'm not betraying my husband in order to forgive them. So she said, this is where I've been, and I haven't had a good night's sleep in 10 years. And then she said, what I've learned today is the meaning of forgiveness. That it isn't about me saying, okay, no hard feelings, forget it, let's move on. It's about healing within myself the wound that has been inflicted. She didn't quite say this, but the sadness and the anger generated within herself. But that's the beginning of forgiveness, is the healing within her own soul. So I think there is a real hope today to be able to introduce meditation into areas where perhaps still many people involved in the institutions of society feel that it's irrelevant. You know, meditation is just an individual, personal thing. It's good for it's good as a prophylactic. You know, it controls stress or helps you relax and so on. Maybe for religious people, it's a way of prayer, but you know, it's personal, it's subjective, it's individual. But it doesn't really have much relevance to the mission of an institution, or the way a profession operates, or how society unfolds. So I think we're moving into a new era where these spiritual values and sense of contemplative consciousness are becoming seen to be integral to every human endeavor, every human work, including that of institutions. So I thought we might take some time to reflect on two aspects of it. One is how we might see our own practice of meditation strengthened and deepened through the days we've spent here on retreat, and how we might see ourselves finding the encouragement or the support for the discipline, because it is a discipline that we all need, and to reflect too upon the element of sharing the gift, teaching meditation, sharing the gift with others, for two reasons. One is that the sharing of the gift with others helps us to share the gift of meditation with others, helps to generate the support and the encouragement that we need. It can be, for many people, maybe thousands of people who run a meditation group already will be well aware of this, but we've heard several witnesses to the value and importance of a meditation group. On the one hand, so then the meditation group sharing the gift helps the individual practitioner. On the other hand, of course, it also opens up a sense of the potential and the value of meditation beyond the individual. This is something that radiates outwards. And these are not contradictory aspects. The benefit to ourselves and the value to others. You know, on a plane, when they're giving you the warning rituals, and they say, in the event of an emergency, gas masks will drop down.
Air masks.
What are they called? You will find this is a quick way of ending the terror that you. This is entirely up to you. We don't accept responsibilities. But it may be a quick way to put an end to your misery. All right. So but they say. Take the gas mask and push it on your children first. Put it on yourself first, because if you don't look after yourself, then you'll be incapable of helping the needy. So self. I mean, there was an old principle in theology is that. It's the same actually, is that our first responsibility is to save ourselves. I mean, we don't use that language anymore, but the first responsibility is to save yourself. And there's a wisdom there. It sounds a bit self-centered, that's why we don't put it like that, I suppose, now, but the wisdom of that is that if you don't work on yourself, then you're not able to be much help to others. So, any reflections on those themes, on that theme? You can just speak spontaneously, and Barry might like to speak spontaneously first.
Yes, feels very spontaneous.
He's leaving to leave this afternoon.
So is Bernard.
What's that?
So is he.
Who's leaving?
Bernard.
Bernard's leaving.
Oh yeah, we're leaving lunch, Arlene.
Okay. Okay, so we'll let you three be the first spontaneous.
I think very often the natural instinct is not to be involved with promoting it to other people. Almost the
meditation?
Yeah. You feel more easily drawn to your own journey than to sort of supporting other people. That's what I feel anyway. And because it is a deeply personal, not so much around, there's an element of, and maybe that's what you're referring to, which is it's not just around the reluctance to the natural barriers with other people or whatever. It's possibly more that it's more that you're naturally pulled to this stage that you're referring to, which is to save yourself first. Maybe that's the balance seems right. And in truth, that it's hard to probably do much for other people if you don't understand it yourself. You can be more of a damage. However, the other side of that is that you're never going to be ready because you're never there. So that you could spend your entire life saying, well, when I get to the next level or when I feel a little bit more, and then you'd be over. So but in my own experience with the College of Physicians, I feel that that initiative is that I feel like being dragged through a bush backwards on it at some level. But the reality of it is that you're people who are seeking are very grateful, and if it's just one, it's worth it.
And Barry, don't forget the point when you went to the President's of the College and the Director of Education, to your amazement, the Director of Education was extremely positive with the President, who you didn't expect had been meditating for 30 years. So from that point of view, these are things you suddenly discovered, which not really, was obviously a great help to you to put it on the kind of curriculum. So I mean, these are something you discovered really then, wasn't it?
That's right. Well, they haven't done anything about it either, which is interesting, even though they may have been clearly predisposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is where it's not, sometimes it's a very small, a small additional step or a small additional increase in speed that determines the fact that the plane takes off.
Yeah.
What has the response been, Barry?
We're sort of living through the response. So, well, I suppose what was the response? I'm loath to use numbers because I don't think it is bad numbers, but we for the first day, which was an introduction to meditation, we were booked out so people were turned away. And that was at a level of 75 or something like that.
At the hospital?
No, this in the
College.
College of Physicians, which is a professional body for doctors, but there are nurses that were invited as well, and some dentists. So there are different people from different clinical backgrounds. So there are, clearly within that, there are people outside of that who look at it and say, well, that's definitely not for me. And then there's other people who I know didn't go on it, but were interested in it. And then there are people who go and I think, and don't like it or just say no way. But I think that's very small. I think that's tiny because I think to go to it, you're somewhere close to it. But it's about creating increasing awareness, and that maybe somebody will be 30 years time when they'll say, I've heard about that. Mm-hmm. I also do think that goes back to the meaning of suffering, or I think that there's, I think very few people, I don't know about this, you may comment on it, I suspect very few people meditate without some level of discomfort getting them there, whether that discomfort is a sense of emptiness or whether it's something traumatic that's happened to them. But a world without suffering or pain probably wouldn't have anybody meditating, I don't know.
Don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I think you have to prepare, people for meditation as a practice that is, if it's integrated into daily life, is going to involve some of the pain of going through different moods and different phases and periods. If you just do a 4-week course on something, you're very, and it's sold well, it's packaged well, and it's you're full of hope about the benefits it's going to bring you, then that's different from being led into something that becomes part of your daily life. Clearly, something that's part of your daily life is going to have a deeper and more comprehensive influence, power of transformation. So I think that part of the art of teaching meditation in this way, we would say, as a spiritual practice, involves preparing people for that, and also giving them anticipation, the right kind of hope in what this will bring them. But ultimately, people have to be ready for it and probably be looking for it. And often when they hear about it, they'll realize this is what I've been looking for. It clicks immediately, like it did for Professor. But you don't know. You can't tell by reading a questionnaire beforehand. and because the people themselves don't know. So my justification for my life and my manifold failures is simply that it's worthwhile letting people know about this, even if they don't take it up and practice it, as you would like them to do, because you think it would be beneficial for them, but that's not for me or any of us to demand or say. But it's better, I think, that people know about it than that they don't know about it.
I think the simplicity of meditation is something which people aren't aware of. And the advantage of here is that you could have your yoga and meditation, or you can have meditation on its own or yoga on its own. They don't necessarily have to tie together, because some people maybe would be keen to do maybe one or other or both. So I think the fact that meditation is so simple is something that people misses out on, because I think people think it's something like floating away, you almost have to go take an IV injection to go high kind of syndrome, and some people's thought process. But the practice is so simple, and the way you describe the children and the book and the leaflets, they were able to do it for 8 minutes,
Yes.
I mean, that's, and they were silent afterwards. It's quite moving, because it shows you that it's almost an innate thing.
Yes. I think that's...
Bernard, isn't that back to Naman? That's back to Naman going into the River Jordan.
Yeah.
He was asked to do something great, but not something simple.
Yeah, that's true.
I also thought that one of the things that I would have reservations about was the idea of the, I suppose, the quality of teaching or witness. So Laurence speaking to the group was fine, but anybody else speaking, I thought was, well, I don't want to go there. So it may not be as good, and so Laurence got us to do some spontaneous discussion, another episode of spontaneous. So the description at the meeting, myself and Peter and Mary Redmond, who's the patient. And I have to say I was quite uncomfortable about it. Not that I didn't have any problem speaking about it, but it was more would this somewhere or other maybe a false sense of humility in a sense, would this take away from their experience of the day? But interestingly enough, some of the feedback that's come back is that people found that very helpful, because they saw, well, actually this is a person like me, and they can get a benefit, as opposed to, this is a monk who's a professional. So I think that probably speaks to the witness of people who are normal, flawed, not perfect, just living the life like everybody else, just saying this is something, and I think that can be quite potent.
Necessary.
See at the time, but on reflection afterwards, and stimulated by some feedback that came from the group.
The Holy Spirit is very present there anyhow, so if a person is ready, if they whisper, maybe all enough they want.
Yeah, you need a variety of voices. I mean, some people will, that's what we're doing with the business world. It's okay for me to speak about meditation, but monk, unemployable, and then you bring in some big names that they would regard as icons of their profession and success, but then they speak from the heart and they speak personally. It just takes them by surprise. They're just really surprised to hear this big guy speak about why they meditate, and sometimes with more or less explicit explanations of what it means to them spiritually and so on. And you'll see it in that little book, Business of Spirit, and I have no doubt, I mean, there's a combination. The more voices you can get witnessing to it, the better, because some people will like you know, others, you know,
I mean, Steve Jobs, I was amazed that he did so much meditation, huge amount of it. For a guy who was the toughest businessman that America produced, and he was so ruthless in so many things he did, and he was unlivable with in many ways because he demanded such standards. And then but maybe that's where he got his ability to focus.
That brings up another question then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Does it have to be grounded in spirituality, or can it, or is it actually dangerous if used to create a psychic control, or control of the psyche, to be ruthless?
Well, that's a good point. I think that's why how it is taught matters, and that it should be taught as a discipline, as a spiritual practice. And there should be some clarity of terminology here to explain what meditation means, and not everything, you know, as the Dalai Lama said once, you know, people in the West think you close your eyes and you relax and you're meditating. But there was something I found very creepy, was in a report on the way the US military, did you see it?
I've heard of it.
They're teaching mindfulness to their soldiers. Now, why are they doing that? If they're teaching it to the thousands or tens of thousands of traumatized soldiers who come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and whose lives are permanently wrecked, that's one thing. Maybe they are teaching it to them. But they're not only, they're teaching it to active military personnel. So how are they doing that? So it's to improve their efficiency. What's their efficiency? And so I read this article, and at the bottom of the article there was a comment, you know, not a kid's for a soldier. It was somebody said, he said, I'm a Marine, or I've been a Marine for 10 years. I don't know all about this meditation. Usually it was inappropriate, I think, to use the word. Anyway, all this meditation. For me, the real meditation is looking through the hair trigger of my rifle, pressing the trigger, and seeing the bee's head explode. That was in the Washington Post. So, certainly an extreme, but well, it shows there is a thing. That's why we've got to be there in witnessing to the full meaning of it and the roots of it. It's not a technique just for mind control. It's a spiritual discipline going back to the roots of our spiritual nature.
How do they teach mindfulness? I mean, do they do it through meditation type thing, or how do they? What are they calling mindfulness?
We would call it sort of little acts of recollection almost. But it's sort of techniques. I mean, it's a good thing in itself, mindfulness. But it's a preparation for meditation. The way it's been constructed from Buddhist techniques has been very effective and beneficial, I think. It's opened the doors for many, many institutions to accept that meditation can be part of their. Now, it's lacking in clarity, but that takes time to find the terms and understand what it is. But basically, it's a sort of becoming using certain techniques of self-awareness, of introspection, of scanning your body, relaxation and awareness, in order to bring about a calming of the mind and integration of the body. And it has these beneficial effects on blood pressure and stress and all these other things. But it's what the people who started mindfulness did was in order to get it out into the wide world, they sealed it off from any contact with spiritual or religious connections, either historically or the effects that it has on you. So in the programs that we do, the 4 week, 6-8 week programs, there's no conversation allowed about the spiritual or religious implications of it. Now, I did have heard that some of the leadership are questioning whether that was the wise thing to do, because actually many people are spiritual and religious. But anyway, that's where they are now, and it's been effective. But I think it has created an opportunity for the religious traditions to bring in the other dimensions of the practice, which some people, I think many people, I would say the majority of people, would be happy to feel connected to.
Isn't there a big contradiction there if it's divorced from any sort of belief system and spirituality? Isn't it then just about what it does for me, which is totally the opposite to what the meditation we're practicing, which is about losing ourselves in order to find ourselves?
Okay, yes, it could be, but if you think of how the hospitals and the schools that were built in the last few hundred years by religious, they didn't, when somebody came in with their arm hanging off, they didn't say, is that a Christian arm or a Hindu arm or a Buddhist arm? They would do what they could to sew the arm back on. So where was the Christianity in that? It was in the witness. It was in the quality of care. It was in the association. We would feel offended if the nurse had said, okay, well, before I sew your arm back on, let's say the Hail Mary.
I don't think...
No, you're not saying that.
Yeah, I think, really at the heart of what you're doing is very different if you have no religious belief or spiritual dimension there.
But it's not black and white though, because faith grows, isn't it? I mean, if otherwise you're saying that prayer exists only meaningfully for those who have religious faith or belief. But you speak to, in the 12-step program, which is a Christian-inspired program, uses the word God in all of its 12 steps, but it does not identify itself with any religion. The 11th step is by prayer and meditation to raise our conscious contact with God as we know God. Well, I met a man once who said that he was failing to do the program, he was still drinking, and he phoned met his sponsor once, and he said, I'm sitting here with a bottle of whiskey, he said, and I just know that if I start drinking it, this is the end of my life. But, I don't think I can do anything. So the sponsor said, get down on your knees and pray. He said, come on, he said, I just don't believe any of this stuff. I don't know what the 11th step means anyway, but so I can't, I can't pray. So he said, get on your knees and pray. He said, I don't believe in anything. He said, get on your knees and pray. And then he said, fake it to make it. And that saved him. He did. And he said, I felt the whole world falling on top of my head. I felt a complete idiot. I felt I was being insincere, inauthentic, but I did it. So, if you wait until faith has achieved a belief, a connection with a belief system, you may lose a lot of lives.
I think there's also, I would certainly see a lot of young people who would have no faith system at all.
Belief system.
A belief system, yeah. And I think mindfulness is very helpful.
Yes, I agree.
It's a starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a starting point. And the faith, if you like, or the let's say in this group, the Christian communication, the transmission of the Spirit, which is the work of the Spirit anyway, happens through the personal connection, through the person who's teaching. Even, I think what we're doing in the, for me personally, if I'm going to the College of Physicians or I'm speaking at the Georgetown Business School, this is evangelization. I see it as evangelization. And if they ask me, I would tell them that. But I don't mean I'm trying to convert them. But it's my life and part of my work and identity and job and vocation to communicate the gospel, even if I don't use religious language. Maybe more effective without religious language in the first stages. Depends on the motivation of the teacher.
Yes. I just have this, looks like we all begin to think I'm a bigot or something, but I just have this thing in the gospel about if an evil spirit is driven out of someone and the house is swept clean, it's actually available then for a lot more evil to rush in. And I just think if people are practicing meditation or mindfulness in a sort of spiritual vacuum, then they could be very vulnerable to unhealthy, destructive forces.
So they shouldn't be in a vacuum. I agree. Well, I mean, I see what you mean. I think there's a long discourse on what that verse means, but I agree with what you're saying. But the way meditation is taught, with or without explicit religious language, I think it can be adverted to at the beginning, because you're saying where I am coming from, and it's a pedagogy.
Yes,
you get their
very
attention.
dependent on the teacher then, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. Of course
Yes,
it does.
I think, I don't know if this helps. I think it's important to note that many mindfulness instructors, it's got diluted in many ways. So there are many mindfulness courses that are very kind of, they're not been instructed by somebody who is mindful, and that's important to remember. But being instructed by somebody who is mindful and practicing mindfulness, it can have a huge benefit to somebody who doesn't have a spiritual connection, because it brings about an alertness and an awareness, and it allows them to be more present. Whereas if somebody has a spiritual connection and they take a mindfulness course with somebody who is practicing, it enriches, it brings, now that's from my experience, it brings about a huge newness, and it allowed me to be more present in a way, even in the sacraments or in my life. So it has, I can see your point, but it also, if you're instructed by somebody who's mindful, I think I feel that it doesn't do damage. It can bring about a huge amount for anybody. You know, so I think but it's important to remember, anybody that hasn't done mindfulness, to seek some instructor if you do decide, even if it's a workshop, to really look and get somebody that knows what they're talking about.